There is a pain unlike any other, a pain that lingers long after wounds should have healed. It is the pain of being forsaken by those who should have cherished you, rejected by those who should have embraced you, and torn apart by those whose very presence should have been your refuge. It is one thing to suffer at the hands of a stranger, but to be wounded by your own blood, that is a different kind of affliction, one that seeps into the soul and leaves a mark so deep that only God Himself can heal it. Perhaps you have felt it, the slow erosion of love in the words unspoken, the cold distance in the eyes of those who once held you close. Maybe you have watched as your kindness was taken for granted, your efforts dismissed, your loyalty repaid with betrayal. You have longed for understanding but found only misunderstanding. You have sought validation only to be met with indifference. And worst of all, you have prayed for unity only to see division grow. And so the question presses upon your heart, why would God allow this? Why would He permit my own family to be the source of my deepest suffering? But, my friend, I ask you this, have you ever considered that this pain is not a punishment, but a test? God, in His infinite wisdom, often allows the most difficult trials to come from the places we least expect. He does not place them before us to destroy us, but to reveal us, to show us who we truly are and who we are becoming. Could it be that He is using this very suffering to sharpen you, to refine you, to break the chains that were never meant to bind you? Think of Joseph. The betrayal did not come from an enemy, it came from his own brothers. It was not a stranger who sold him into slavery, but those who shared his blood. Imagine the sting of their jealousy, the cruelty of their actions, the depth of his despair. And yet, what man intended for evil, God used for good. What seemed like rejection was, in fact, redirection. Joseph was not being abandoned, he was being positioned for a greater destiny. And then there was David. It was not a distant foe who sought to crush him, but Saul, the very man who should have guided him, nurtured him, prepared him for the throne. But instead, Saul's heart burned with jealousy and he pursued David relentlessly. Was David at fault? No, yet he was forced to flee, to endure years of hardship and isolation. But do you see what was happening? David's trials were not delays, they were divine preparation. And what of Christ? His rejection did not come from those who knew Him not. It came from His own. His own people turned their backs on Him, mocked Him, sought His downfall. And yet, in the face of this ultimate betrayal, He did not break. He fulfilled His purpose. So I ask you, my friend, what if this trial, this very pain inflicted by your own family, is not meant to destroy you, but to awaken you? What if God is showing you that not all who walk with you are meant to stay with you? What if He is allowing the rejection, the coldness, the distance, not to break you, but to bring you closer to Him? What if He is teaching you that your worth was never in their approval, but in His calling upon your life? The enemy wants you to believe that you are unloved, that you are abandoned, that you are insignificant. But I tell you this, God does not waste pain. If He has allowed this suffering, then it serves a purpose. Have you noticed how God often removes certain people before He elevates you? Have you observed how, just before great breakthroughs, great betrayals occur? Could it be that He is revealing to you who truly belongs in your life? Could it be that He is showing you that the approval you have long chased was never necessary to fulfill your destiny? It is a painful realization, but a liberating one. Not everyone tied to you by blood is tied to your purpose. Some will misunderstand you because they cannot comprehend what God is doing in you. Some will reject you because they do not see what He has placed upon you. Some will mock you because they fear what they do not understand. But listen to me, You are not defined by their rejection. You are defined by God's selection. And this is where faith must rise. This is where the test becomes clear. Will you allow their treatment of you to define your worth, or will you trust that God's plan is bigger than their opinion? Will you let bitterness take root, or will you allow this suffering to draw you closer to the one who will never betray you, never abandon you, never forsake you? Because, my friend, if your own family has become your greatest test, then it only means that God is preparing you for something greater. And now I want you to reflect. Are you seeing the signs? Because the truth is, God does not allow suffering without purpose. And if you look closely, you will see the signs. Signs that He is using this trial to reshape you, to protect you, to guide you towards something greater. They constantly undermine your worth and purpose. There is no greater ache than being unseen by the very people who should recognize your worth. When your own family dismisses your potential, belittles your dreams, and treats your ambitions as nothing more than foolish fantasies, it does something to the soul. It shakes the foundation of your confidence, making you question everything you once believed about yourself. You were raised among them. You share their blood, their history, their struggles. And yet, when you take a step toward becoming something more, when you dare to break free from the cycle, to build something greater, to embrace the purpose God placed within you, they are the first to doubt you, discourage you, and diminish you. And so you begin to wonder, why does my own family not believe in me? Why do they reject my dreams instead of nurturing them? Why do they act as if I am incapable? As if I am chasing something beyond my reach? But have you considered that this is not just a rejection? It is a test of your faith, a test of your resilience, a test of whether you will allow the opinions of others to dictate the path God has carved out for you. Look back at the great men and women in Scripture. Joseph's own brothers sought to destroy him, not because he had wronged them, but because his destiny was greater than their own. They saw in him what they could not see in themselves: a divine favor, a calling set apart. And instead of celebrating his potential, they resented it. And so they conspired against him. They cast him down into a pit, thinking they had buried him. But what they failed to understand was this: what is placed in a pit by man can still be raised to power by God. Your family may not throw you into a literal pit, but their words, their doubt, their silence, and their dismissive glances are meant to bury you just the same. They want to keep you small because your greatness threatens them. Your desire to rise forces them to confront their own stagnation. Have you noticed this pattern? The moment you begin to change, the moment you start working on something bigger than yourself, they no longer treat you the same. They make sarcastic remarks. They laugh at your aspirations. They remind you of your past failures. They tell you that your dreams are impossible, that you are overreaching, that you are destined to fail. But hear me, what they say about you does not define what God has placed inside of you. Their lack of belief in you is not a reflection of your ability, it is a reflection of their own limitations. They cannot see what you are capable of because they were never meant to. Your purpose was revealed to you, not to them. And what God has whispered into your heart will not always be understood by those who were never meant to walk the same path. And this is where the real test begins. Will you allow their words to take root in your mind? Will you let their disbelief shape your decisions? Will you hold yourself back just to fit into the smallness they have chosen for themselves? Or will you rise even when they refuse to acknowledge your worth? Because, my friend, greatness is never recognized in its infancy. Those who are closest to you will not always see what God is doing in you. because they only know the version of you that existed before the transformation began. Do not be discouraged when they fail to believe in you. Even Christ himself was rejected by his own people. Even he, the Son of God, stood in his own homeland and was met with disbelief. A prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives and in his own home. Mark 6:04. Do you understand what this means? It means that rejection is not a sign that you are unworthy. It is a sign that you are being set apart. Pay close attention. Who are the ones always telling you that you are not good enough? Who are the ones always reminding you of your past, but never celebrating your progress? These are the people who fear what you are becoming. They see your light, but they do not want it to shine too brightly. They recognize that if you succeed, their own complacency will be exposed. But here is the truth they will never admit. They know you are capable. They know you are different. They know that you are not like them. And that is why they try to convince you otherwise. Because the easiest way to stop someone from rising is not through force. It is through doubt. If they can make you doubt yourself, they do not have to stop you. You will stop yourself. But today I ask you, will you let them? Will you let their disbelief become your burden? Will you allow their words to weigh heavier than the calling God has placed in your life? Or will you walk forward despite them? Because, my friend, the moment you decide that their opinion is irrelevant to your purpose is the moment you will truly be free. They turn your kindness into a weapon. There is a pain far greater than rejection, a wound deeper than silence. It is the suffering of being used, manipulated, and unappreciated by those you love the most. You have given them your heart. You have sacrificed for them, stood by them, and carried their burdens as if they were your own. You have been patient when they were cruel, forgiving when they were thoughtless, and loyal even when they were undeserving. And yet, instead of gratitude, you are met with indifference. Instead of respect, you are treated as an afterthought. Your kindness, instead of being cherished, is turned against you. Have you felt this? Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you love and realized that they do not value you the way you value them? Have you ever sat in a room full of family and felt like an outsider because no matter what you do, it is never enough? There is something crushing about realizing that your love is not reciprocated, that your efforts are not acknowledged, that the very people you would give your life for would not even lift a finger for you. And yet you continue, because you believe that if you love them enough, if you give enough, if you prove yourself enough, they will finally see your worth. But they don't, because to them your kindness is not a blessing, it is an expectation. And the moment kindness becomes an expectation, it is no longer seen as a gift, it is seen as weakness. They have learned that no matter how they treat you, you will always be there. No matter how much they take, you will always give more. And so, instead of valuing your presence, they take advantage of it. Instead of cherishing your love, they exploit it. And worst of all, when you finally begin to pull away, when you finally start to protect your heart, they call you selfish. It is a cruel irony, is it not? The ones who drained you, who took everything from you without hesitation, are the same ones who make you feel guilty for setting boundaries. The ones who benefited from your kindness are the first to call you heartless when you finally refuse to be used. And so you are left with a choice. Do you continue to give and give until there is nothing left of you? Do you allow them to drain your spirit, to turn your compassion into a burden, to make you believe that your worth is tied only to what you can do for them? Or do you recognize the test for what it is? Because make no mistake, this is a test. God does not call you to be a doormat. He does not ask you to sacrifice yourself on the altar of someone else's selfishness. There is a difference between love and enslavement, between kindness and self-destruction. Even Christ himself walked away from those who refused to see his worth. He healed the sick, raised the dead, and gave sight to the blind, but still there were those who mocked him. He performed miracles, yet still there were those who doubted him. He poured out his love, yet still there were those who rejected him. And do you know what he did? He did not beg for their approval. He did not try to prove himself to those who refused to see. He turned and walked away, because he understood that not everyone deserves unlimited access to you. And yet you sit here today, heart heavy with the weight of their disregard. You wonder if you are wrong for wanting to be loved the way you love. You question if you should stay, if you should keep giving, if you should keep proving your worth to people who refuse to see it. But let me ask you this: if they have not seen your worth by now, will they ever? If your years of kindness, loyalty, and sacrifice have not been enough for them, do you think another year, another effort, another sacrifice will change their hearts? Or will it only break yours? This is what God is trying to show you. This is why He is allowing you to feel this pain. Not because He wants you to suffer, but because He wants you to wake up. He wants you to understand that love should never be one-sided, that kindness should never be a burden, that your worth is not tied to how much you can give before you collapse. And so, the test is before you. Will you continue to pour into empty vessels? Will you keep lighting their world while they leave you in the dark? Or will you finally understand that God never created you to be used? He created you to be cherished. They isolate you and make you feel like an outcast. There is a loneliness that cuts deeper than solitude, a kind of isolation that does not come from being alone, but from being unseen in a room full of people who should know you best. It is a silent rejection, a slow erasure, where the people who were once your foundation slowly push you to the margins, not with words of anger, but with indifference. Perhaps you have felt it, the cold distance, the unspoken words, the glances that once carried warmth, now filled with something unfamiliar. You walk into a room and the conversation dies. You speak and no one listens. You reach out and your hands find only emptiness. Your presence is tolerated but never welcomed. And you ask yourself why. You have done nothing wrong. You have given your love freely. You have been there in their hardest moments. But when it is you who needs a hand, you find only shadows. It is a cruel irony to be surrounded by family and yet feel like a stranger. But I ask you this: what if this rejection is not a curse, but a divine separation? What if God is pulling you away from them because you were never meant to stay among them? Joseph was isolated before he was elevated. His own brothers, the ones who should have celebrated his purpose, cast him out. Not because he had wronged them, but because his presence alone was a reminder of what they refused to become. His dreams threatened their comfort. His favor exposed their insecurities. And so, they did not just reject him, they removed him. Have you ever considered that maybe your presence makes them uncomfortable? Not because you have done anything to harm them, but because your very existence is a mirror that forces them to see the things they wish to avoid. Your growth, your ambition, your pursuit of God, it shines a light on their complacency, and instead of rising, instead of confronting their own shortcomings, they choose to push you out. It is easier for them to exclude you than to change themselves. And so they leave you out of conversations. They stop inviting you. They celebrate others, but never acknowledge your victories. They create a world where you are always on the outside, looking in. And it hurts. It wears down the soul, making you wonder, Am I unworthy of love? Am I so difficult to accept? Why does my own family see me as a stranger? But here is the truth. You are not being rejected. You are being set apart. God is not allowing this isolation to destroy you. He is allowing it to prepare you. Think of David. Before he was crowned king, he spent years in the wilderness, cast away from the very people he was destined to lead. But that isolation was not for nothing. It was in the wilderness that he found his strength, his faith, his unshakable connection to God. What if your isolation is the same? What if this pain is not meant to break you, but to teach you that your belonging was never meant to be among them? That your home, your security, your acceptance, it was never meant to come from people who cannot see the anointing on your life. Because the reality is this: if they cannot see your worth now, they never will. They have already made their choice. They have chosen to keep you at arm's length, to deny you the love that you have so freely given, to let you walk alone when they could have walked beside you. But hear this: God sees you. He sees the loneliness in your heart, the silent tears, the questions that you whisper into the night, and He has not abandoned you. Because sometimes isolation is not a punishment, it is protection. He is removing you from those who would limit you. He is closing doors that were never meant to be opened. He is breaking ties that were never meant to last. And though it hurts, though the rejection stings, though you long to be accepted by those who should love you most, this is where your faith must rise. Because if they have made you feel like an outcast, it is only because God is calling you to something greater than what they can understand. They resent your growth and success. There is a peculiar kind of pain that does not come from failure but from success, a suffering that does not arise when you fall, but when you rise. It is the realization that not everyone will celebrate your victories, that not everyone will be proud of what you have become. And the most painful part? Sometimes the ones who resent you the most are the ones who should have loved you the deepest, your own family. Perhaps you have felt it, the shift in their tone when you share good news, the lack of excitement when you achieve something meaningful, the way their smiles fade the moment your light begins to shine a little brighter. You expected resistance from the outside world. You knew that strangers might doubt you, that society might not embrace your journey. But what you did not expect was that the very people who raised you, the ones who watched you struggle, would be the ones to grow cold as you found your way. At first you make excuses for them. Maybe they are just busy. Maybe they did not mean to overlook my achievements. Maybe I am imagining their indifference. But deep inside, you know the truth. They are not happy for you, they are threatened by you. Your growth forces them to confront what they have refused to change in themselves. Your success reminds them of their own unfulfilled potential. Your elevation exposes the areas of their lives where they have settled for less. And so, instead of clapping for you, they stay silent. Instead of lifting you up, they pull away. Instead of supporting your journey, they look for ways to minimize it. It is not that impressive. Anyone could have done that. Let's see if you can maintain it. Their words drip with subtle resentment, but the deeper wound comes not from what they say, but from what they do not say. The celebrations they refuse to give, the moments they choose to ignore, the way they discuss others with admiration but struggle to acknowledge your accomplishments. And in those moments, you begin to question everything. Why do they not see my effort? Why does my happiness make them uncomfortable? Am I doing something wrong by trying to become more? But my friend, this is not about you, this is about them. There is a reason that Joseph's own brothers hated him. His dreams did not harm them, but they exposed something within them, something fragile, something insecure. They could not bear the thought that he was destined for more than they were willing to pursue, And so, instead of rising with him, they sought to destroy him. And this is what you must understand. Some people do not hate you, they hate what you represent. They hate that you had the courage to do what they never did. They hate that you refused to stay small when they had convinced themselves that smallness was all there was. They hate that your success means they can no longer pretend that greatness is impossible. And so their resentment is not about your success, it is about their failure to grow. You see it now? Your presence, your progress, your refusal to settle. It challenges their reality, because if you can break the cycle, then what excuse do they have? If you can rise above the pain, then why have they remained in it? If you can pursue more, then why have they chosen to stay stagnant? They do not resent your success. They resent what your success reveals about their own choices. And so they distance themselves. They downplay your achievements. They convince themselves that you have changed, not because you have become arrogant, but because you have become a mirror they cannot bear to look into. But here is what you must remember. Their approval was never the reward. God did not bring you this far for them to validate you. He did not call you higher just for them to recognize your greatness. He called you because he saw something in you that they refused to acknowledge. And that is why their resentment is the greatest proof that you are on the right path. Because if your growth did not matter, they would not feel the need to resist it. If your success was insignificant, they would not be bothered by it. If your destiny was ordinary, they would not be threatened. But they are, because deep inside, they know what you are becoming, and that terrifies them. They betray you in moments of weakness. There is a kind of betrayal that wounds the soul more than any enemy's attack ever could. It is not the betrayal of a stranger, nor the deception of an outsider. No, it is far more personal. It comes from those you trusted the most. It is the dagger that strikes when you are already on your knees. Perhaps you have been there. You have stood at your lowest, hoping for a hand to lift you up, only to realize that the very people you thought would catch you were the ones who let you fall. Maybe you have shared your struggles, opened up about your pain, allowed yourself to be vulnerable, only to have your words turned against you, your trust shattered, and your suffering exploited. This is no accident. This is the test. Because betrayal does not happen at random. It happens when the enemy sees you at your most fragile. It happens when you are tired, when you are weary, when your heart is open and your defenses are down. That is when the attack comes. But what makes this kind of betrayal unbearable is that it comes from those who should have been your refuge, family, blood, the ones who should have been your shield in battle, not the ones wielding the sword against you. You ask yourself, why would they do this? Why would they turn their backs on me when I needed them most? Why would they use my pain as an opportunity to hurt me further? The answer is painful, but it is clear. Some people do not love you. They love the version of you that is easy to control. They do not resent you when you are weak. They resent you when you start to rise. They do not feel threatened when you are struggling. They feel threatened when you are about to break free. And so, when they see that you are trying to heal, trying to move forward, trying to escape the limits they placed upon you, that is when they strike. Because if they can keep you wounded, they can keep you dependent. If they can break your trust, they can break your spirit. If they can make you doubt yourself, they can ensure that you never outgrow them. But here is the truth. God allows betrayal for a reason. Judas did not betray Jesus when he was performing miracles. He betrayed him in his most vulnerable hour. He did not turn on him when the crowds were cheering his name, but when he was preparing for his ultimate purpose. Because betrayal is never random, it is always strategic. The enemy sees what God is doing in your life. He sees the breakthrough that is coming, the elevation that is ahead, the destiny that is unfolding. And so, he does what he has always done. He uses those closest to you as his weapon, not because they are strong, but because they have access to your heart. Joseph's brothers betrayed him not when he was weak, but when he was chosen. David was hunted not because he was insignificant, but because he was anointed. Jesus was crucified not because he was wrong, but because he was the truth. Do you see it now? The betrayal you have faced is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that you are dangerous to the forces that wish to keep you small. It is a sign that you are growing, because the people who betray you in your weakest moments were never meant to walk with you in your strongest. They were only meant to be part of your lesson. And now you must make a choice. Do you allow their betrayal to define you? Do you let the pain turn into bitterness? Do you let their actions convince you that you are unworthy of love? Or do you recognize the betrayal for what it truly is? Not the end of your story, but the beginning of something greater. They discredit your faith and relationship with God. There is a silence more deafening than words, a rejection deeper than mere distance. It is when those closest to you, your own family, begin to mock, question, or discredit your faith in God. They do not understand your devotion, they do not comprehend your prayers, and worst of all, they see your walk with God as something foolish, something unnecessary, something that makes you different from them. Perhaps you have felt it, the judgment in their eyes when you speak about God, the sarcasm in their voice when they hear you pray, the dismissive way they shrug off your spiritual journey as if it is nothing but a phase, an illusion, a weakness. You share your faith and they roll their eyes. You speak about the power of God and they challenge you with mockery. You stand in righteousness and they say you are trying to act holier than thou. And deep inside it wounds you, because these are the people you love, the people who should walk beside you, who should support your growth, who should be proud that you have found a path that brings you peace. But instead they belittle it, they laugh at it. They try to pull you away from it. And you begin to ask yourself, why? Why does my faith offend them? Why do they resist something that has only brought me closer to truth, to peace, to purpose? Why is my love for God something they cannot accept? But my friend, this is no accident. This is the test. From the beginning of time, those who have walked closely with God have been rejected by those who refused to see Him. Noah was ridiculed for building an ark when there was no rain. Moses was doubted even as he led his people to freedom. David was mocked for trusting in God's power instead of wearing Saul's armor. Even Jesus himself was rejected not by strangers first, but by his own people. A prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. Mark 6 verse 4. Do you see it now? This rejection, this judgment, this dismissal of your faith, it is not about you, it is about them. Because when you choose to walk with God, you become a reminder of everything they refuse to confront. Your faith challenges their complacency, your discipline exposes their lack of self-control, your devotion reveals the emptiness in their own hearts, and instead of seeking the light for themselves, they try to snuff out yours. Because it is easier to mock what they do not understand than to admit that maybe, just maybe, they are the ones who are lost. This is why they try to make you feel small. They call you delusional when you say that God speaks to you. They call you naive when you say that faith is more powerful than fear. They call you extreme when you choose to live a life of righteousness. But let me tell you something, their rejection is the greatest proof that you are on the right path. If you were walking the same way they were, they would have no problem with you. If you were living the way they lived, they would embrace you. If you compromised your faith to fit into their world, they would welcome you with open arms. But God did not call you to fit in. He called you to stand apart. And that is why they resist you. That is why they try to discredit you. That is why they attempt to weaken your faith, because they see something in you that they do not see in themselves. They see conviction where they have doubt. They see strength where they have weakness. They see purpose where they have confusion. And instead of seeking what you have, they try to destroy it before it destroys their illusions. But here is what they do not realize. Your faith is not something they can take away. They may reject you, but they cannot reject the truth. They may abandon you, but God never will. They may discredit your faith, but they cannot change the reality of God's presence in your life. So let them mock, let them doubt, let them question what they do not understand. Because the deeper your faith, the stronger the resistance, and the stronger the resistance, the greater the calling. This is not just opposition, this is confirmation. God is showing you repeatedly that they are not meant to walk with you. There is a heaviness that lingers in the soul when you keep holding on to people God is trying to remove. It is the burden of forcing relationships that no longer serve your spirit, of clinging to connections that have long been severed in heaven. Perhaps you have felt it. You keep trying, you keep forgiving, you keep reaching out, hoping that maybe this time things will be different. You convince yourself that if you just love them enough, if you just prove your worth, if you just endure the pain a little longer, they will finally see you. They will finally change. But they don't. Instead, they hurt you again. They betray you again. They turn their backs on you again. And yet, you stay. Not because you are blind to their actions, not because you do not see the truth, but because letting go feels harder than holding on. But my friend, God has been showing you the signs, the whispers in your heart that tell you something isn't right, the unease you feel in their presence, the moments where you cry out to God, begging for love from those who refuse to give it. These are not coincidences. These are warnings. But you ignore them because the thought of walking alone is terrifying, because the idea of losing the people you once cherished feels unbearable, because deep inside you still hope that maybe, just maybe, things will turn around. But what if I told you that God is not asking you to lose them? He is asking you to trust Him. What if their rejection is not a curse, but a divine redirection? Joseph's brothers betrayed him, and for years it looked as if he had lost everything. But in truth, he lost nothing. He was simply being moved to where he was meant to be. David was chased away by Saul, forced to flee from the very place he had once called home. But in truth, he was not abandoned. He was being prepared for the throne. Even Jesus himself had to walk alone. He was rejected, mocked, and deserted by those who should have stood beside him. But in truth, his loneliness was not a punishment. It was part of the plan. And now, here you are, standing in the middle of the same test. You are holding on to people who have already let go of you. You are trying to repair what God has allowed to break. You are clinging to the idea of what family should be instead of seeing them for who they truly are. But hear me. Not everyone tied to you by blood is tied to your destiny. Some people were only meant to be part of your story for a season. Some were placed in your life not to walk with you but to teach you. Some were never meant to stay, only to push you toward the place where God has been calling you all along. And the more you resist this truth, the longer you delay your blessing. Because as long as you continue to chase people who are running from you, you will never move forward. As long as you keep seeking love in places God has already removed it, you will always feel empty. As long as you hold on to what God is trying to take away, you will never receive what He is trying to give. And that is why He keeps showing you the signs. The conversations that no longer feel the same, the tension that lingers in every interaction, the exhaustion that comes from trying to force relationships that refuse to grow. But still, you ignore it. You tell yourself that things will change, that you just need to be patient, that maybe one day they will finally love you the way you deserve. But what if I told you that God is not asking you to wait? He is asking you to walk away. What if I told you that your attachment to these people is delaying the very blessings you have been praying for? What if I told you that every time you hold on to someone who hurts you, you are telling God that you do not trust Him to bring you better? Because the truth is, letting go is not the end, it is the beginning. It is the moment you stop begging for love from people who do not have the capacity to give it. It is the moment you stop seeking validation from those who never understood your worth. It is the moment you stop mourning the loss of people who were never meant to stay. It is when God removes, He replaces. When He closes doors, He opens new ones. When He separates you from certain people, it is only because He is aligning you with those who will truly walk with you. But you will never find them if you keep looking back. So ask yourself, how many times has God shown you the truth, and how many times have you ignored it? Because the signs have been there all along, and the longer you fight what God is doing, the longer you delay the destiny He has prepared for you. You have walked through pain, through rejection, through betrayal. You have stood in rooms filled with people who share your blood, yet you have felt like a stranger among them. You have loved deeply only to be met with indifference. You have given selflessly only to be taken for granted. You have sought peace only to find conflict. And through it all, you have asked yourself, why? Why does my own family treat me this way? Why does my love feel like a burden? Why am I always the one left out, misunderstood and unappreciated? But now you see the truth. This is not just suffering. This is your test. God is not punishing you. He is preparing you. He is using this pain to shape you, to strengthen you, to refine you into the person He has always intended you to become. Because the truth is, not everyone tied to you by blood is tied to your purpose. Joseph's brothers tried to destroy him, but they only positioned him for the palace. David was chased by Saul, but it was only part of his preparation for the throne. Jesus Himself was rejected by His own people, but that rejection was part of His divine mission. And now it is your turn. You are being tested. You are being separated. You are being called to something greater. But here is the real question. Will you recognize what God is doing? Or will you continue holding on to the very things He is trying to remove? How much longer will you wait for people to change when God has already revealed their hearts? How much longer will you beg for love from those who refuse to give it? How much longer will you shrink yourself just to be accepted by those who were never meant to see your worth? Because, my friend, your destiny does not depend on their approval. Your purpose is not tied to their validation. You have spent enough time grieving their rejection. Now it is time to rise. Because if they cannot love you now, they never will. If they cannot celebrate you now, they never will. If they cannot walk with you now, they were never meant to walk with you at all. And that is the truth God has been trying to show you all along. This is not the end. This is your moment of transformation. So let them misunderstand you. Let them question your path. Let them walk away if they must, because you are no longer chasing after those who were never meant to stay. You are walking with God. And when God is leading you, you will never be alone. If this message resonated with you, if you have ever felt the weight of being rejected by your own family, know this: you are not alone. God sees your pain, He knows your struggle, and He has something greater in store for you. So today, choose faith over fear, choose growth over guilt, choose purpose over people, and most of all, trust that when God removes, He replaces. When He separates, He elevates. And when He tests you, it is only because He is preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. If this message spoke to your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's build a community of faith and strength together.